which again, outstanding achievement. Thanks everyone for pledging your space and your time to our Gemini 3F testnet. The latest version that under 37,000 coins TSSC. And then 7 BTY. I'm not so familiar with that guy, but he's made the first page as well. So nice to see these guys. We'd be really interested if anyone wants to step forward and tell us what kind of hardware you're throwing at the problem to achieve these stats, because they're genuinely astounding. Very, very interested to hear from you guys privately if you don't want to approach publicly. We will treat the information in confidence. But yeah, so that's the state of the network roundup. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Additionally, another thing that has been occurring over these past couple weeks is our developers have been hard at work doing multiple releases throughout the week. I think we've had about 5 releases since our last Farmer After Hours, which is, as always, great work, and shout out to our development team for the hard work they've been doing in that direction. Those who have been here for a while know that our release cadence has definitely increased significantly over these past couple months, which is great to see, as that's definitely one of the things that we're hoping to improve upon. And I would say they're doing great work so far. So in kind of summary of these 5 past releases, you can expect various different improvements. One improvement that we can expect to see is auditing performance on Windows. It's been improved through the October releases, but also Nazar has been able to resolve a regression that was going on there, to where September 25 release is no longer the last one that can work on Windows. The October 6th release should work on Windows just great as well, but also still while retaining some optimizations that have been introduced over these last few versions. We've also introduced some network tuning and optimizations on the DSN and network side, which should improve node syncing and plotting performance. As always, we would love to see your current experience with those processes as well. There's also been a significant amount of development progress to utilize our release announcement channel that we have. We have that channel set up with various GitHub actions that automatically get notified anytime there's a new version. So if you want to make sure you don't miss any Pulsar or Advanced CLI release, that would definitely be the place that I would suggest. Obviously, you can also always keep an eye on our GitHub, as that's where all of our releases originate as well.
Thanks, Justin. And speaking of watching our GitHub, of course, just wanted to touch on one of the things you mentioned there, Justin. It's very interesting. So, proof of time. Yeah, so those eagle-eyed community members who have maybe starred and follow our mono repo, which is GitHub/Subspace, you may have seen some snapshot builds appearing in the releases channel, and they are the team testing what will become Gemini 3G. And as Justin said, one of the big features is proof of time, which is a feature designed to ensure the security of the network. But the really interesting thing about it, for us farmers, of course, is that it means we can adjust the window in which the amount of time, the window in which you can produce a solution. So those of us who are struggling, maybe because we're running a plot that's a little too large for us to find a solution in time, this allows you more time to look for those solutions, and it also fixes the security attack vector on the protocol. Obviously, this is testnet. We know that we're not complete yet. And our march to mainnet, these last few features are being implemented, and you are absolutely not just instrumental but essential to that testing process, so that we can launch day one with a strong network, which is of course our overriding goal. So thanks for the release rundown there, Justin. I wanted to talk quickly about an interesting question that came up recently within the community. So I'm just going to read some notes that are adapted from a conversation that I was reading between Nizar and one of our community members about BPS. So those of us who read our logs from the advanced CLI farmer will be familiar that there's a BPS message that gets logged repeatedly while we're syncing by the node. So BPS is blocks per second, and it demonstrates the rate at which your node is importing blocks during the sync process. If it's 0, it means you're not importing anything, which can happen. I'll come on to that. But you should generally see a figure in that BPS when you first start your node up. So that sync process is split into two distinct phases. So you'll see when we're syncing old archival history from the DSN, that's when you're going to see the blocks per second message appearing. And then the second stage of syncing is for recent history, which is known as the substrate sync in Nizar's parlance. So that first phase from the DSN, it doesn't have extensive communication in the logs right now. And during that process, what's actually happening is the node is reaching out to the rest of the network to determine how much history was archived so far, and download pieces of that archival history that are potentially useful and import the blocks contained there. The second phase tends to happen quite quickly, and you'll start to see messages. You'll see the BPS message disappear, and you'll start seeing messages like idle and imported, the sign of a healthy synced up node, of course. I just wanted to point out that this wasn't always true. It certainly wasn't true in previous iterations of the network, but it is currently expected to see 0 BPS for a few minutes on node restart. And the reason for that is it's collecting information about the archived history from other nodes on the network, and querying, or collecting pieces that potentially contain useful blocks to your node. Nizar says that we will try to improve the logging around this in the future. But in the grand scheme of things, we kind of have bigger fish to fry. It's a nice to have at the moment. But hopefully this explanation has given you some clarity. So yeah, hopefully that helps. And I noticed that Capybara has popped a question in the chat. So, what is the normal or best BPS? Okay, so that I think is a function of kind of your hardware and your internet connection that you're using to run your node on this network. So I haven't been out of sync in a while, so I'm not sure. Do you have what's your peak BPS, Justin? Do you know on 3F? I've been in sync for quite some time now, so I haven't actually been in that state for a while.
The highest one I've seen, and this was just in the one case that I was resyncing, was about, I think, 15, maybe 12 BPS. But I have a little bit quicker internet than most people are fortunate enough to have.
Okay. I do recall that not long after the network started, you could see very high, especially when the blocks don't contain much information, you could see very high figures. So as far as peak goes, I'm sure I've seen it over 100. But that is not the norm. As the blocks fill up with data, you can expect that to slow down. But that's a great question, Capybara. Okay, so Emil's chimed in as well at 15 BPS. Seems to be around the max. Okay, that's excellent. So hopefully that gives you some insight there, Capybara. Okay, so Penguin, I've kicked the hornet's nest. I see you've got some good questions there for us. Should we tackle those now, Justin, or should we carry on with our next set piece?
Yeah, well, let me just knock out this next section piece, and we can hop into Lazy Penguin's questions there and the rest of the questions. Just because I do feel like this section does kind of pertain a little bit to farming, and may kind of relate to some of the questions that some users may have. So those who have been with us for a while will have seen in Discord and maybe even participated in one of these discussions themselves. But we've had lots of discussion in the past and over these past few months about optimizing the DSN and syncing. As Jim just mentioned, kind of explaining some of that the blocks per second process. But overall, we've seen many different community members, and I've even suggested it myself, of adding various different parameters to the node or the farmer. We've seen parameters such as out peers, in peers, DSN target connections, things along these lines. Well, we had a discussion with the developers over the last week and got some valuable insights from Shamil, who's actually our dedicated network engineer here. So some things that he kind of threw our way and that we thought would be helpful for you all to hear is that, while there's obviously a lot of options and parameters that we have available in the node and on the farmer, some of the parameters that we think might be helping with our DSN syncing speed actually are likely having no or very little effect, and probably our best case left untouched. So those parameters in particular, the ones that you'll want to probably leave alone and leave to the default, are going to be the out peers, the in peers light, DSN target connections, DSN pending in connections, and DSN in connections. Speaking with all of these, you're not likely to see any improvement when it comes to your overall DSN speed. While it may give you a higher peer count or things along those lines, it's not necessarily going to result in a quicker actual syncing process or farming or plotting process or anything along those. But we do have some clarification on which parameters will actually help with the DSN syncing. One thing to keep in mind, though, is these parameters are set to their defaults to keep in mind the capabilities of most standard consumer modems and routers. So modifying any of these next coming up parameters may, increase that drag or the hardware utilization, I guess, on your modem or router. So make sure you probably, if you're going to do that, you might want to ensure you have a little bit higher tier one above, the basic one you normally get with your generic internet service provider. But some of the parameters you can set on the node to optimize the DSN sync performance will be the DSN out connection, and DSN pending out connection. Similarly, for the farmer, you'll want to utilize the out connections and the pending out connections as well. Utilizing these two flags on both the node and farmer is likely going to give you the biggest potential improvement on seeing any faster speeds with DSN thinking and things along those lines. But keep in mind, obviously, like we mentioned above, that this may put a little bit heavier load on your modem or your router. So if you see any network issues, just make sure to back those connections closer down to the default, and you should be all set from there.
Thanks, Justin. There is a new section in the docs, which I'm going to pop into the chat. However, I've just tried to use this and it does seem to jump around. I think we may have a little gremlin on the docs site. I'd be interested if anyone else is having the problem. So if it does jump for you, if you look about halfway, about 2/3 of the way down the screen for me, obviously it'll be different on your monitor, but you're looking for the optimizing DSN syncing section in the right hand sidebar, and there's an explanation there for you to digest at your leisure about the parameters we've just discussed. We have to warn you that fiddling with those parameters, you do at your own risk. But we are interested in any feedback that you may be able to provide about how changing those values goes, of course. So yeah, thanks, Justin. Okay, so Penguin's got another question. I'm going to come back to yours, your first question shortly. Penguin, sector deployed successfully, sector replotted. Okay, what key values to use? That's an interesting one. So, I mean, this looks healthy to me, Penguin. For anyone else who's looking at his screenshot, what I can see is a farmer log that's telling me that he is 98%. Actually, do we reach the end here? Let's have a look. Have you just finished plotting entirely? It does look like it. Okay, so you've just finished plotting. Oh no, 98. So sorry. Okay, so you're very nearly plotted, Penguin, and I'm guessing that's about a 2 terabyte plot, 2 to 3 terabytes, if I'm guessing something like that, based on how far the percentage is going up. So I can see you are plotting. You've also got some replotting messages in there, and you've also got your winning rewards, which is exactly what you want to see. There's nothing in there that's causing me any concern. So you're not finished plotting yet. You are replotting some sectors. So sectors expire after a certain amount of time. There's a great conversation on the forum about this. I'll see if I can find it in a minute and link you. Essentially what happens is you are storing information in your plot. And obviously fresh information is coming into the network all the time. But if you have like a static plot, you won't be storing that information. So replotting is the process of new information being spread securely and efficiently across the network. So everyone's storing little bits of the new data, and the way that new data is making it into the plots is through that process of replotting. I know that people complain, but unfortunately it's fundamental to the protocol. And the reason people aren't always happy about replotting is because the additional load resources that process takes, there's a perception that takes well, there's not a perception, there's evidence that can take resource away from winning rewards, which is of course what everyone's here for. So Penguin, have I missed your point there? Can you follow up?
And I just want to mention about replotting too is luckily the replotting should lessen as the network gets larger. As my understanding is as we see less and less history doubles, if you will. You can expect less replotting and recommitments to go through, as the chances of your sectors expiring and needing to be updated gets a little bit less and less as we see the significance, I guess, of our space increase.
That's a great point, Justin. Yes, absolutely. So you have to remember that we've bootstrapped to testnet from zero here. So the replotting is a little more aggressive, or I should say actually a lot more aggressive than you're likely to see on a more stable mainnet that's been established for a while, because it's linked to, it's proportional to the amount of data and how much that amount of data changes. So if, for example, the network is, the history is like 100 gig, then growing to 200 gig represents a big change. But if we're at 4 petabytes where we are now, to double that is obviously quite an undertaking. So we should see that slow down. Okay, so how to set up keys more effectively so that plot and replot doesn't interfere with farming. I'm not sure that's actually possible, Penguin. You could reach out to the devs on the forum and ask, but what your screenshot of your logs shows me is a node that looks healthy, if I'm honest, at least from my understanding. So I know you're no stranger to asking on the forum, so maybe you could take that question over there and ask the devs if there's some parameter you can fiddle with, but I suspect you may get an answer which is along the lines of the default parameters are designed to be optimal. So I'm afraid I don't have an exact answer for you there, Penguin, which is probably a perfect segue into answering your other questions. Okay, right. So when will Stake Wars be announced? Soon, Penguin. You will be one of the first to know, I'm sure. It will be tagged all over the announcement channels, our Twitter, our LinkedIn. We're going to send a raven. Everyone will know when Stake Wars is about to be announced and is announced. What will be the computer requirements for the next network? So you've put Gemini 3F, but I think you mean Gemini 3G there. So I haven't seen any updates to system requirements come through from the developers yet. We do know that a parameter has been changed, the K parameter, which will make plotting harder. However, I don't think that that throwing hardware at the problem is a solution. So I believe the hardware requirements are the same at the moment. Obviously, we're testing on DevNet at the moment. We'll get some insights into how the software behaves there, but I'm afraid I don't have an update for you there. So at the moment, you can assume that the hardware requirements are the same.
I was just going to say with Gemini 3G or the next version, we hopefully will see maybe the first start of our implementations of our proof of time, which the proof of time, while the K parameter has gone up, should increase the reward submission window, which we hope will help with some of the smaller issues that users have been facing, such as like the CPU clock issues and things along those lines. But as Jim mentioned, obviously we'll need to test that and get your all's feedback and see if that actually works in practice. But in theory, we should also see some of those improvements as well.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to be corrected here, but I think the K parameter change, I think it just affects plotting. So it may take longer for you to plot the data in the first place. And we've now got the proof of time, which is another lever for us to pull, or a dial for us to twist, I guess, as far as allowing more time for solutions to be searched for, and more inclusivity. I don't know that for sure, but I'm inferring that from what will happen if we're able to increase the solution window. So yeah, it would be wonderful if we can get slower clock speeds winning rewards. Will the screen's just gone off. Will the emission be fixed in the next network? Yeah. So the idea, Penguin, and I know that you've raised this particular question to our devs, and as I was giving you an answer. It is designed to be fixed, yeah. Please do appreciate, though, that this is a test network. I know that we've had a discussion about this in Discord. The idea is that at the moment, in an ideal world, in a perfect world, I should say, we would be producing 1 block reward and 9 vote rewards per block, so every 6 seconds. That 6 seconds can fluctuate depending on the state of the network, like how much space is being pledged. Those block and vote rewards are worth 0.1 TSSC each. Again, I'll find you the forum post that I provided clarification on how it should work, how it's designed to work. But again, it is a test net. And if you have a particular question, again, though, right now is not up to 14,400 coins per day. You've got a thread open with Nazar. I'd be interested to, if you could provide the figures, then maybe that can be dug into. So thanks for that question. Number 4, when the test net ends and the main net starts, will there be a vesting for farmers and node runners? So I'm gonna have to take that one away. I could answer what I think is accurate, but I want to be absolutely certain, Penguin. So I will come back to you on question 4 and 5, which is if they are vesting. So what Penguin's asking is, will the rewards that you're earning now on the incentivized testnet, will they be available for transfer on day 1? And if they're not, if they vest, if they're part of maybe there's they're locked or there's a vesting schedule while they're locked, can they be staked, as in many other protocols? So you can passively grow your stack by staking while they're locked. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that they won't be locked, so you'll be able to do what you want with them. But that comes with the caveat that I may well be corrected when I double check that. Are there aspirations for listing on top exchanges, or is this not a consideration? I'm afraid I can't talk on that at the moment, Penguin. And number 7, another tokenomics question. I don't want to give you incorrect information, Penguin. So when will the tokenomics be published? They're coming soon, TM. I would direct you to our last community call, where there's a section in the middle where Todd releases all the information that we can share at the moment. So please do check that out if you haven't already. Great questions as always, Penguin. Thank you very much.
Got kicked out by the cleaning lady along the way, so he may have missed some of that. But luckily, we have it recorded or on our live stream for Lady Penguin's future reference.
Absolutely, Penguin. And just our preference is that you ask the question in public, because if you have the question, there's a very good chance that that others will have that question, and we would rather, we're transparent, we give you the information that we can, so we would rather those questions came out in a public forum. Okay, well, we'll see you shortly, and thank you, Zulkis. You've managed to link the conversation that we've had that I was referring to while I was answering Penguin's questions. Oh, I feel like I've been talking for ages, Justin. I can't see anything.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, Zdolkis's post was a separate question that he's facing, where he's actually, let's see, his Pulsar farmer is showing a different reward than what the Polkadot Explorer shows. So, just for context for anyone who's not taking a look, On Pulsar in his CLI, it says you have earned 19.5 SSC in Farm 13 blocks. And then in the actual Polkadot Explorer, it's showing 19.1 TSSC. So this is actually a common occurrence, Elkis. Likely, we probably need to rework our Pulsar reward detection a little bit. But ultimately, what's happening here is this is one of the nuances between the winning a block locally and actually having that block accepted by the entirety of the network. So sometimes we can see a little bit of a bifurcation or separation and difference between what your farmer thinks it's won versus what the network has actually gone, oh yes, this is what you've won. To provide some context, what effectively happens is if you and your farmer and another farmer effectively both won the block at roughly the same time, what likely happened is farmer B, meaning not Zolkis's farmer, proposed the block right as Zolkis's was also proposing the block. Meaning in his farming terminal, it says, reward hash signed X, Y, and Z. But once that was actually proposed to the network, it was rejected because the network's already moved on to the next block because it accepted farmer B's solution. Where this results in this whole displaying issue is that when we do that check on the farmer side, on your actual terminal side, we are basically, for lack of a better term, the way the command works is it's basically doing a grep for rewards signed and votes proposed. So if you proposed a block and that block was not accepted, you still have a line in there that says, sign this reward hash. So it kind of can slightly throw off that counting a little bit on your local farmer versus the actual network itself. Good news is this isn't an error or anything like that. Ultimately, this is actually one of the golden features of a blockchain is, that is consensus in action ultimately. And this will be slightly reduced as proof of time gets implemented, as it will open up the reward window a little bit and have us a way to actually prove in a cryptographic way which block was truly proposed first. But beyond that, also, it will kind of get everything in alignment and hopefully clear up those issues from popping up on the farmer side or the Pulsar side, because I know that can definitely be confusing in some cases.
Great questions, Orkis. I apologise. I didn't realise that you'd linked two separate posts there. And great explanation. Thanks, Justin. So, reorgs, a feature of any blockchain actually, and consensus. Okay, I can't see any other questions, so we've got some common questions we can go through. Shall I kick us off, Justin?
Of course, yeah. Take it away.
Okay, so we've tried to compile a list of questions that we see recurring in the community. So we just like to kind of reiterate the answers at every opportunity, of course, to try and spread the knowledge. The more who understand how these issues crop up and what the solutions are or the explanation for why they're happening, the better, as far as we're concerned. So I'll kick us off. So I'm getting a permission denied error when I start the farmer or node. What should I do? So if you are encountering a permission denied error, the first thing to do is to make sure that you've set the execution permission on the binaries. So we're specifically talking about Linux-based systems here, but that would usually be like a chmod plus X. Hopefully that makes sense to people. And if that doesn't work, you probably then need to take a look at the user or the role. So we're talking about Linux security here, which is running the farmer. Does it actually have the necessary permissions to read and write to the directories you've specified? So obviously in the advanced CLI, you'd be setting the path to your plot. There are some other flags as well, like you can use base path on the node, for example, if you want to run your node somewhere other than the default location. And yeah, you could have the situation where, for whatever reason, the folder that you've pointed your plot to, your user doesn't have access to it. Now, Justin, I believe you need, is it ls minus, I want to say a, but I think I'm wrong, to get the long form, and it shows you the rights assigned to a folder.
ls-a I think will work, and then you can also do its-l, I believe. Obviously, it will vary based off of the distribution you're on as well. So that was also that kind of monkey wrench, if you will, when it comes to Linux. But ultimately, you should be able to pull up those permissions in various different ways, or even on the GUI. I know that's rare to use in Linux, but if that is the case, you can also try that route.
Yeah, you're quite right. I've just tested it, Justin. It's ls minus l. Ignore my first answer. I think a shows hidden files, maybe. Yeah, it does. So I was mixing the two up. It's ls minus l, and it will give you like a string of rights and the owner of the folder. So you'll need to work backwards from that information to see if the account under which you're running the process has access to the path. But yeah, permission denied error. We actually saw that very recently. I saw you answering a farmer probably last week, I think, Justin.
And it's one of those ones you might not think of initially. I know Linux permissions can always be fun. The next question we have is that we commonly see is, I'm getting an illegal instruction error and the farmer node does not start. How can I resolve this issue? So the illegal instruction error is one that we commonly see. This generally will indicate that your CPU may not currently support the binary or executable that you're running. So in most cases, we have two versions of all of our executables. We have a version 2 and a Skylake version. If your CPU is a little bit older, you're going to want to use the version 2 version, and if it's a little bit newer, you'll want to use the Skylake version. Ultimately, this just comes to play because we have different instruction sets. We do require ADX support, so some of the older processors, there had to be some workarounds, which is what that version 2 is for. Ultimately, if the error ends up persisting on the version 2 and on the Skylake, what this tells us is really your only remaining option is to try and compile the node and farmer from source. This will give it a particular instruction set from your CPU, but beyond that, there does come a point where we do require a certain amount of features, especially within the cryptographic and ADX side of things, obviously to support the Subspace network. So start with version 2, or start with Skylake. If that doesn't work, try version 2, and if that doesn't work, try compiling from source. And of course, if you face any trouble while compiling source, feel free to reach out to us in our support channels. We're always happy to help out with those kinds of things, because obviously it's not the easiest process in the world.
Thanks, Justin. Just to align with Justin, I'm going to jump a question. Because I edited the answer earlier based on something that I read last night. So the question is, I'm not receiving rewards on older EPYC or Xeon processors. What can I do? So this issue is often observed on slower clock systems, particularly on the older EPYC or Xeon processors. While there's no simple fix, recent versions of the software have improved this situation. But ultimately, the problem is caused by the lower clock speed of the cores. So if you've got a fancy EPYC CPU which has maybe 32 cores and 64 threads, it may be counterintuitive that that's not able to farm really well. But what we found is that the software does enjoy a higher clock speed. I know that we've got some vocal members of the community who are running on like 5 gigahertz processors with great success. So the information that I edited, I'm just going to read what I changed here. So some have had historical success by adjusting the NUMA settings on EPYC processors, though this information may not still be accurate for the latest builds. And this is because one of our community members who I know was adjusting the NUMA settings on their processor, they very recently said that actually it hasn't helped on recent builds. It hasn't, well, not so much hasn't helped, but it just hasn't made a difference, which I think is changes are being made to the software all the time, obviously with each release. So I just wanted to clarify that if you read, oh, there might be a NUMA settings fix for your processor, search NUMA in Discord, and you'll find those conversations. But I believe the latest information suggests that it may not be the silver bullet it once was. And particularly affected are certain VPS and server providers. And the reason that could be, and this is a certain amount of speculation here, is that when you are renting VPS space, you're sharing the CPU with other users, and you can have this noisy neighbor effect. So if you're sharing your CPU, and even worse for a disk intensive process like plotting, a noisy neighbor who is taking some of the CPU or IO bandwidth from you could really affect your ability to farm and sign reward hashes and ultimately win those rewards. So yeah, high clock speeds are definitely preferred at the moment, but we can, we're learning as we go along here. With each iteration of the software and each version of the network, the behavior has been slightly different. So yeah, we enjoy having you along for the ride and hearing your experiences. It allows us to identify the trends and the patterns.
Thank you, Deb. We have a question in the chat from Fumo696. He says, is it any possibility to use HDDs instead of SSDs? Is it enough speed with RAID 0? Maybe your mix-up SSD with HDD with RAID 0? Ultimately, Fumo, the predicament is really just by the nature of the way hard drives work, and how it kind of clashes with Subspace Network's proof function. So just to give you an insight, when you have a plot on the Subspace Network, you have a chunk of the Subspace Network history, and then you will randomly do proofs on those various chunks of history. So if you have, chunks 0 to 100, randomly you will be asked, what is the answer to 76, and do a proof on chunk 76. Now, this is where the SSD side of things comes in. Due to the fact that it could be any random number of data on that index, and a hard drive just natively does not really work in a system like that. Mostly because hard drives being physical storage, they have to spin up that platter, and then it has to work its way down the entire disk, similar to a CD. Whereas with an SSD, an SSD is really irrelevant. It doesn't really care which data you ask for, as it's all available, in a solid state and can be accessible at any time. So you can definitely try, messing with various different RAID settings and combinations and things like that. I would definitely be curious to hear your trial and see if you have any success. But ultimately, it's really a difference in hardware and kind of underlying principles in the way those two different storage mediums work. That's going to kind of cause some, your issues, if you will. Once again, give it a shot and let us know if you can find anything or have any success. Obviously, we would love to. The more storage options, the better. But I don't think you will have too much luck in that direction, at least following my current understanding.
Yeah.
Another question.
Sorry, Justin.
No, go ahead, Jim.
I was just say it's the random that causes the headache for spinning disks. There's the physical movement, the the hardware causes the delay. Sorry, Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. I was just going to mention, another common issue we do run into a lot as well, that we're seeing is how do I recover from a recovering missing pieces failed error? So this is one that you'll see pop up on the farmer side oftentimes. Usually might occur after maybe you turned your farmer off for a little bit or had an outage or an internet outage or something along those lines. And you will see recovering missing pieces failed, retrying, ... and this may repeat a few times or even quite a few times as it kind of works through your plot. Overall, this is a common issue and really kind of an expected issue, as it is just a DSN saying, hey, I missed this particular section within our plot. We need to recover this piece. Overall, in I'd say 99% of cases, it will self-resolve itself over time. Just be patient, let it kind of run through. It'll kind of continue to sync. There are some very rare cases where if you have maybe a really, really large plot, or there was some kind of data corruption and your farmer closed unexpectedly or something along those lines, you may see it kind of just repeating and you can't seem to get out of that cycle. You can always try wiping your plot, obviously, but we want to warn this should probably be kind of saved as a last resort solution. To give you kind of insight, if I find myself in that position, I'll generally let my farmer run for maybe 2-3 days trying to recover those missing pieces before I think about wiping my plot. But that's just me personally, just to give you guys some insight on kind of how to gauge that. Obviously, wiping our plot is never really an ideal solution, as that kind of is a little bit of an opportunity cost while you're down and trying to replot after that. But overall, in most cases, as I mentioned, that issue should self-resolve itself for you all.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, I need to just backtrack to an answer I gave earlier because I actually reached out internally. So, Lazy Penguin, I hope you're still online. You just disappeared. Perfect timing. Okay, the cleaning lady's finally kicked him out. Okay, but for anyone else who's listening, and hopefully Penguin later on, feel free to hit me a DM, Penguin, if any of this is unclear. But the tokenomics questions and about locked tokens and vested tokens, these details are still being worked through. As I mentioned, if you check the community call, I'll find the link in a minute. You'll hear that we're working with a company called Block Science to finalize our tokenomics. So while I appreciate that there's a really strong appetite within the community to hear exactly how the token's going to work, we can't release the information just yet because it's still being decided. So my answer earlier, I have to walk back from, I'm afraid. So just wanted to let you know. Hopefully Penguin doesn't listen to this later and he's not off telling all of his friends my incorrect answer from earlier. So there's another common question we've got here. How can I address the error while reading piece from cache situation? So the answer we've had, this looks like it's from the forum. The error while reading piece from cache, that error should not occur, especially on SSDs. There's two possibilities that could have caused this. Data corruption on disk, which if the data is corrupted, it may have been corrupted before writing due to memory issues, which could be caused by overclocking. So what we're saying is that it's a data corruption issue, and potentially that corruption has happened in memory before the data's written to the disk, or it's happened when it's being written to the disk. So there's those two situations, but ultimately the root cause is this: the root cause of the error is the same. Is that the data you've got persisted on your disk has somehow been corrupted. So the application might believe it's operating on correct data or performing correct computations, but corrupted bits are written during writes. If the data isn't corrupted, it could be memory issues corrupting in-memory data. So we've read the data and somehow it's got corrupted there, but the plots remain fine. So again, it could be the data could become incorrect in memory before it's written, or after it's read, it could become corrupted then. It could be the sign that your storage media is on the way out, or it could be any other kind of hardware issues. So we were talking about, it could be a motherboard or a CPU problem. If you start with a memory test and it succeeds, then you can use the scrub command, which is documented. If you check the documentation site that I've linked further up in the chat, and search for scrub, you'll find how to do that, and that attempts to find and correct errors. So run the scrub, restart the farmer, and it will replace the broken data with correct data. So that's your ultimate fix there. I see. Thanks, Justin. Drop the link. But yeah, no problem. Cheers.
But yeah, then definitely, one also I just wanted to mention too. One time that I've seen this issue pop up is if you're farming on an external SSD and you accidentally unplug it while it's farming, or tap it and it kind of does a disconnect reconnect kind of thing. I've ran into that error in that direction, which in some cases might throw you for a loop there. Another question that we're seeing pop up a little bit here is verification failed for block, header rejected too far in the future. This has actually been probably one of the more common issues, or I guess long-lasting problems that we'll continue to see. This error generally occurs when your node, or your computer that is running your node, the system clock is drifting too far from the correct time. Being that we don't have proof of time implemented yet, currently we're using the system time, for time stamping and things along those lines. As we all know, clocks are all just, asynchronous systems that kind of continuously sync off of each other. And your computer might run out of sync, run into a wrong time section. Ultimately, all you'll need to do is just resync your time on your computer, and this should resolve this issue in 99% of cases. In very, very rare cases, this can create a fork, in which case you might need to wipe your node, unfortunately, or even your plot. But in most cases, just fixing your time server and just verifying that time is synced accurately should resolve that issue for you. And make sure that your blocks are not too far in the future and are just right in the present.
Yeah, I've seen that issue recently a couple of times, Justin. It's very easy on a Windows-based system. You can just go into the time settings and ask it to sync up. Windows bake in a time server that corrects it. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I've just seen we've got a couple of questions from the community in the chat. So, what is the best way to stop a farmer? Control+C with CLI seems to create never-ending warn situation where kill -9 is needed. Litend 1, or ND1 maybe. So this is a new one on me. I do know that I've seen that it can take a while to shut down sometimes. So I've seen it sit potentially for a couple of minutes, not recently, but on previous builds. I've seen that the node, the farmer, in fact both, can take a few minutes to shut down. So I'd be interested to see some logs and see what you mean by that never-ending warn situation. Is that something that you see scrolling on the screen? So can we have a little more information, please? And then the next question. So from Fumo696, how to correctly calculate, approximately of course, the amount of RAM required for plotting and farming. Okay, so anecdotally, we've got a community member who suggested that he was able to farm. Now, let me just get this right. I'm not sure, you can correct me, Justin, if I've got this wrong. I think he said he was running, was it 70 terabytes in 60 gig of RAM? It was a surprisingly low amount, or maybe it was just under 70 gig of RAM, actually. It was a surprisingly large amount of plot space. So There's also an issue with Windows misreporting the amount of RAM that the process uses. So it'd be interesting for you, mate. Are you having an experience where you're seeing lots of RAM usage, maybe more than you're expecting?
Well, I will mention too the other thing that I always keep in mind is the network. Since it is a memory-bound encoding that Subspace is using, it will it likes RAM. It's very RAM. They're good pals. So it will often use the amount of RAM it has available. Obviously, we'll continue to optimize this, but so if you have 68 gigabytes of RAM, it's going to eat that up for lunch and enjoy it and use it nice and smoothly along in its farming process. But if you only have 8, it'll get along with 8 as well. One thing that can definitely help if you're on the smaller RAM side is to make sure you have swap configured or swap space configured within your system, so that way anything that the RAM can't complete, it can at least write to disk and kind of use the virtual RAM kind of processes along the way. Sorry, didn't mean to take over there, Jim.
Yeah, sorry, Justin. I was just trying to find those exact figures. Okay, so if you know, I have 7 terabytes plotted, and they now use about 31 gig. Okay, that doesn't sound too terrible to me. I'm not sure. I don't think it goes up linearly either, based on other farmers we've heard from in the community. I'm sure it was not a figure much higher than that on a substantially larger plot. Okay, we're approaching time, guys. I see Tommy and Fumo are both writing in the chat. We'll take a couple more questions. Okay, so Fumo's suggested that during plotting it takes more, but it was in a previous version. Okay. I mean, bring us some more solid stats, Fumo, and we can feed those back to the devs. These are we have a limited amount of hardware to test the software on. This is why it's so valuable, your feedback. Okay, great. So Fumo's just said that on the newer versions, RAM looks more cool, which I'm going to take as we're not using so much RAM, which is great to hear. And thanks for this. Well, thanks for your testing, Fumo. It's great to have you along for the ride. Okay, so Tommy's chipped in. All my servers use the max amount I give them. The smallest of them has 25 gig and one has 80 gig. Both use the max amount. Tommy, is that on Windows? Okay, I'll just reiterate then that we know that there's an issue with reporting the amount of RAM being used on Windows. What I've found is that it will report that all of my RAM is being used, but anytime I actually want to run an app that's going to take a considerable amount of RAM, it's available to that app. Things don't start going, misbehaving as if we're out of memory. So, okay. Right, we are at time, guys. So, Justin, do you want to provide a bit of an outro?
Of course, yeah. As always, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for the great Q&A and lots of questions. As always, we are doing events every Wednesday currently. So we'll have one next week. Will be our developer office hours. There will be, we'll have Jim, who's up here with us today there, and also Emil, who's currently in the audience. He's been taking the lead on the developer office hours. So look out for that event. Anyone who's got a knack for development on the Subspace network, that would definitely be the community or the call to go to. As we've continuously teased, which I'm sure you guys are almost tired hearing, but we still have Stake Wars and the Space Race coming soon. Jim's leaked out a little bit more details over that over the past week or two, so definitely check out those announcements in our forums or on Discord as well. But also stay tuned because we'll have more details to come, and hopefully we'll get that event moving forward here in the near future. Additionally, as we've mentioned, we are currently working on bringing localization to our documentation. So on our docs, you'll see in the top right, you now have the option to select through a few different languages. We're currently trying to expand that localization as much as we can. So if you're someone who speaks 2 languages, definitely check out our translation guide. Feel free to provide any translations on our Crowdin. We've tried to keep that guide as comprehensive as possible. And also rest assured, if you do contribute, we are currently working on a good incentive structure. You'll see our newest changes is our localization leaderboard, where we're kind of starting to rank various different contributions for the translation. So keep that in mind, and we would love to see your guys' help. And as always, thank you for your continued dedicated support for the Subspace Network. And thank you, Jim, for all your help today.
No problem, Justin. I forgot. I meant to. I want to spam everyone quickly with. So we have an ongoing docs contest. Last month we didn't have a winner, which means it's rolled over. Normally it's $250 a month. If helping to improve our documentation and winning 500 USDC is something that interests you, please do check out the forum post and jump into our docs and provide some changes that improve them. And finally, Justin and I are generally available on Discord far too many hours a day. So if we haven't fully answered your question or you've got a burning issue, please do jump into Discord. Farmer chat or farmer support are the preferred channels. Jump in and ask your questions. And thank you, Nona. Nice to see you.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate all your help. Have a good one, everybody.